Well, Akuna freaking Tata. It's the circle of life. Data is part of the circle of life. If only the Lion King had data, he'd know not to trust. In data we trust, they say. So these are some of the places I've spoken at about data in very, very many countries, interestingly enough. The Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris. This is a class from Sri Lanka. I taught innovation whilst I was vomiting during the entire course and had to eat spicy food and drink alcohol the entire time. It went really well, the course, but I survived only with magic pills from the chemist. This is a Oz government incubator, Austrade, and these are some of the mix of people I've worked with. That's a bit of an old photo, but it's all really multicultural, all really multinational, and it's sort of just all over the shop, really, from Korea to Africa to everything. And we did some data science projects. Any consultants in the room? A few? Okay, we beat a consulting firm, one of the three, we're not going to say which one, and we beat their own in-country team, which we're really happy about, so that was quite fun. And we did some work with the Paris government and stuff. So it's all international, it's not really Australia-focused as much. But we are in an international world now, right? We're not in an Australia world. Chances are that data governance breach from Optus, it's gone to somewhere overseas. Or at least some of it's going to end up in the hands of someone. The US government got breached and 3 million people's records got breached, and that includes the psychological records of all those military personnel and everything, which all got into enemy hands back about 2017. So yeah. So this for the OCD and the organised amongst you is what we're going to cram into this session, but it'll split into two. The first bit is data careers, which will be a little short introduction, and then the next bit is going to be about cities and data, about a global context for Brisbane. Who here is from Brisbane, by the way? Show of hands. Oh, wow, okay, so it's mostly from Brisbane. Okay, and for the people working remotely, watching remotely, I used to be from Melbourne, so I came to my senses and moved north to Queensland, where I'll never, ever, ever go back. Sorry, Melbourne. Except for the coffee. But that coffee was pretty good. So this is a video game. We're going to play a video game first because I don't want to make it dull. Who likes video games? A show of hands. Cool, okay, so it's about 50% of you, and the rest of you probably play them with your kids as well. So, okay, so let's play a video game. Now this lady here is data enlightened. She's achieved data nirvana. She's at one with the machine. It's where we're all going, apparently. So if you're a player, you've got some exposure to data. It doesn't matter. So we're going to go through the levels of the video game, right, in terms of a data career. The first one, God bless your cotton socks. You believe school. You believe that somebody is going to pay you to spend 100 hours building an R model to solve something you can solve in 30 minutes with Excel. Now, these are graduates I've had and have taught, and I can tell you they always believe they're going to program everything and they're going to be doing strategy from day one. If you're a graduate, you realise that's not the case, is it, once you get out? So you don't believe school, unless you've got a great lecturer. You have a few. The great lecturers, they are God's gift. Believe your first boss. Now, that's good. Believe your first boss. If I'm your boss, I'm happy you believe me. That really does work out well for you. But I've taught about 100 of these, 100 graduates sort of thing in data science and that. The ones that are best often don't have a data science degree. They have a commerce degree or accounting degree, or they have some weird combination of interests. People who work at McDonald's do really well as data scientists, by the way. Interesting little heuristic. And believe the data. Now, that's where most people get to. They believe the data. Now, it's good to believe data. And before I ask the next question, why wouldn't you believe data, though? Well, kind of, most of the stuff in the news is wrong. Almost everything you hear is wrong. Unemployment is not how many people are actually employed. It's not really. Unemployment's not unemployed people. It's really a technical measure. It's based on working 1 hour. There's about eight or so million, just over 8 million full-time employees in Australia. There's 25 million of us. So a lot of it's casual, part-time work. It's not really what you think. Almost every data set you get to in ABS is not what you think. COVID data, I collected COVID data for a global consulting firm, and our team did data, and wow, okay. Let's just say that somebody put the dots in the wrong map on the map, and they said the epicenter was in Italy, and the journalists were saying in Italy it's in Rome, but it was just because the software had a mistake in it. It's actually Milan, near Brescia. So believing data is good, but there's another level. This is the engineers. Who's an engineering background, engineering, computer science? Okay, now these are my people. Here we go. My dad was one of these. You believe what you can test and prove. This is where you get to. If you can validate the data, now you believe it. That's probably the ultimate level. That's the best level you can get to. Validate the data. God bless the engineers of the world. But there's a hidden Elon level. Elon Musk. He gets away with everything. He gets away with smoking dope and drinking whiskey and talking about technology. The man's a living force. At this level, everyone else is an NPC or non-player character. Only Elon plays this game. That's a good movie too. At this level, data creates reality. You are inside the matrix. That's the truth. You're inside the matrix. Now, welcome. Now, this, if you're watching a movie reference, Spider-Man, those of you who like comic books, show of hands who likes comic books. Okay, I'm collecting data on all of you, right? So it's about 18%. I do this constantly. So one of the things is that you create reality. And whatever you share with your colleagues, they're going to take the number. Now, if the number's bad, that is bad for you. You learn that. And so basically, I describe data science, data analysis, and being a CDO as being punched in the face repeatedly with anybody short of Mike Tyson and walking away from it. That is data. And data just tells you stuff, and it's often not what you expect. So take care of your colleagues. Make sure you don't give them bad data and then they come around and metaphorically punch you in the face. You can't punch people in the face anymore, though my first boss would disagree with that. So anyway, great power comes great responsibility. So now we're going to talk about cities. So one of the things people aren't aware of is that if you're using national data in any sort of metrics for marketing, who's in marketing? Anybody in marketing here? Marketing, advertising, all that, media? Okay. Anything like that, if you're using national data in any of your projections and any models, it's normally not very useful. It's 800% variation to cities. So a city can vary so much. I mean, life expectancy varies between cities. Infant mortality varies between cities. So anytime you're putting data into a data set, it's better to look at it from a city point of view and not from a national point of view. Because a national point of view, think about how big Australia is. Is it Australia or is it Brisbane? I mean, if you're in somewhere north of Darwin, somewhere sideways of Darwin, you're not really having the same experience of life as you are in Melbourne, right? Just read the NT News. So what we do with cities is we gather these great big city data sets. And every year we publish this cities index of world's most innovative cities. So the question you get is, which is the best city? It's the number one city. But it's a very interesting data exercise. It means you have to adapt to all the differences of cultures. French data is totally different to German data, is totally different to Spanish data, the whole lot of it. And the number one question I get asked is, where do you get the data? And we gather data from all these different sources and we merge it in. So it's a really big exercise in just creating these giant databases that all have to be designed, if you're trying to deal with it, to basically handle all the data from all the different countries. You know, you've got to deal with Chinese language sets, Japanese language sets, all this sort of complicated stuff. It's really quite challenging. So this is what people want to know. Which is the most innovative city from the data? Well, at the moment, 2021, during a pandemic, I'll read them because they are quite small. Tokyo, Boston, New York, Sydney, Singapore, Dallas, Fort Worth, Seoul, Houston, Chicago, Paris, London, Silicon Valley, Atlanta, Seattle, Shanghai, Stockholm, Miami, DC, Beijing, and Los Angeles. Now, most people have a gut reaction. Anybody have a gut reaction to that? Show of hands. Yeah? Okay, a couple of people. Okay. Most people say, oh, my city's better than that or worse than that. But basically, we're using data to do something interesting. Measure where you want to live, where you want to work, and that sort of thing. And so it's been in all these different media outlets. You don't see a lot of it in Australia because we don't promote it as much in Australia. And the reason being is every single time, what do they ask? How does Sydney do versus Melbourne? Why is Brisbane, why is Adelaide not doing well? Why is Adelaide doing well? Why is Canberra doing well? Why is Canberra not doing well? That's the sort of question. But the number one, Sydney versus Melbourne. God bless. So many people use our model, and some of you who are a bit geeky might be interested in this. We get downloads from every single country on the planet to find out which cities are the best. So anything to do with city rankings, we're kind of on that, and city data. It's a bit different use of data. So one of the cool things we do is we look for hot cities. So places you could live or places you like. Miami has been going hot for about 7 years. Well before pandemic, it's been doing well. Sneakily moving up. Dallas-Fort Worth continues. Texas is just across everything. Great, doing really well. Austin as well. Atlanta, people don't know, it's doing very well. Stockholm and Seoul, as well as, of course, Tokyo. So all these cities are just like hot cities that are happening. Interesting places, Reykjavik sometimes, Taipei, if nothing happens there, are all interesting. And when I say we're not racist, what we mean is that we try to avoid the skew in the data sets towards there's more data on Britain and there's less data on other countries. So we go to the trouble of reading Japanese data. And let me say that reading Japanese data is a lot of trouble. It's all the R&D, all the city prefectures, and God forbid, you need a bottle of scotch after you finish. So this is how Brisbane does for the numbers people, which are most of you. 10% of the top 10% in the world approximately, just outside, over 5-year average. And then top 8% now, and still going up. So if you're wondering, does Queensland have a bright future? Yes, it does. Brisbane has a bright future. Brisbane is steadily and doing exactly what we like to steadily improve. You've got one city council, God bless, makes the world a better place. Melbourne's got about 67 million of them. Spots there in 2021. It keeps moving up, so it's trending up. What about the rest of Queensland? Well, who's from outside of Brisbane? Anybody from outside of Brisbane here? A few? Okay, cool. So if you're from the GC, HOTA, the little arts precinct, done a nice little number on the GC. It's moving up. Cairns, CPAC is another thing we look at, moving up. Sunshine Coast, where I live, is going to be entering soon. And Townsville is to be advised, I guess. We'll see how that goes. And these are the ranks globally of all the different Australian cities. They do vary a little, but basically Brisbane and Perth are trending up a little, and the others are a bit of a roll of the dice. GC's trending up. The smaller ones, but they're doing well because they're still small and they're still in a global context. And if Geelong became a satellite of Melbourne, we'll do excellent. Okay, so this is a little bit about it. I'll just mention that's sort of the scope of it, and it's a crazy project. Don't ever try to repeat it, please. If I'd known it was going to be this much pain, I would never have done it. If I'd known I'd have to learn how to Google in Spanish, I would never have done it. If I'd known I had to read Japanese data sets, I would never have done it. Why do we do it? Well, it makes a city more dynamic, makes it more desirable. That's important, right? You know, you want a desirable place with lots of laneway bars, lots of fun places. Where'd you go to eat last night? Somewhere fun? Usually people go out when they're on conferences somewhere fun. You want that. You want it to be a little bit like Melbourne, but without the pain. I love Melbourne, but it's just off the boil a little at the moment. That's why it frustrates me. Each city has its strengths, right? So we try to measure what makes Brisbane Brisbane. This is a very difficult job, but it's fun. It's enjoyable. I get to talk about interesting stuff. And so you can do something interesting in data that's not necessarily traditional, yeah? But we are only a small company and it is painful, so that there's a downside. So data tells stories and it creates a sense of belonging. You can belong anywhere from the data. You can feel like you're in a home. Who's got a favourite city? You want to call out a favourite city? Boston, yeah. Okay, Boston ranks really well, actually. The universities, great structure there. Pretty good food scene, pretty good cultural scene. It's got a decent transport for an American city. So anybody got another one, got a favourite one? Singapore, okay. World's best transport system of a sort. Great gardens, great planning. Got rid of corruption a while back, though that might be an issue still for everybody. But yeah, it's a pretty great place. And what's another one, favourite city? Copenhagen, okay, world's bicycling city, and it's got excellent, some excellent professionals in the data space and excellent governance frameworks and things like that. So yeah, cool. So basically each city has a soul or a sense of it, and then you can measure that, you can quantify it. So what we do is we collect data about cities and we share that with companies and they buy the data because it's better to have city data than national data. And we find out weird stuff, like Brisbane is number 1 in the world for parks. Did you know that? Number 1 out of 500 cities. We run an algorithm, best parks in the world, close to parks, lots of green spaces, all that sort of thing. So things you can find out, how many restaurants there are, how long's the lifespan, how many of you have a rad bod, how many of you have 1-pack, how many have a 6-pack, how many of you drink, how many of you don't drink, how many of you should drink, what's the average health of your GDP of your city. Alcohol and coffee do get you through the occasional data science nightmare. So don't be a guy like this. I'm going to end on a lesson why this is important. Ljubljana sushi guy. Now, I went to Ljubljana as a guest of the mayor of Ljubljana, and I sat in the former communist chamber of deputies eating reindeer curry. It was actually reindeer curry whilst the mayor's children played on a flute. It was like a Wim Wenders movie or some other weird sort of postmodern instruction. And there was a guy across the road who served sushi, and I went across and had a cup of coffee, because it's the only place to have a cup of coffee, right? And sushi guy, guess where he was from? He was Australian. He was the only sushi guy in Ljubljana. And they know that people want sushi, right? People basically like sushi. Well, there was nobody selling sushi. There were 12 Indian restaurants by my count, and there was one sushi restaurant. Who was making a killing? Ljubljana sushi guy. This is a few years ago now, but you can actually be like sushi guy, right? Basically, pick where the gaps in the market are rather than just copy what everybody else does. So this is just I like superheroes, why not? Take care of your colleagues, be a data superhero, not an NPC. And people want stories. They want something from the data. They want the data to tell them a meaning. They don't just want numbers. They want a story. And if you're Elon Musk, you can smoke dope and drink whiskey whilst you do it. So that's a link tree. That's the easiest way. There's a newsletter on there about cities if you have an interest in cities. And there's also a download for the index. You can download in Excel. And there's a team email there and that sort of thing. So if I've got any time, I might take a question. Or am I on time or not? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I might take a question. Yeah.
Just one sec. Because we have people online, we like to make sure that they can hear you. So just
I've
thought.
Yep.
Keep going. All the way to the other side of the course. It's always the other side of the hallway. So if someone over here could prepare the next question, that would be really useful. Go ahead.
I'd like to ask, what is your favourite city?
That's Paris. Although it's impossible to live there and get to a doctor's appointment on time. But it's the most beautiful artistic city, and there's not a lot of data reasons, although they are number 2 in most industries. So that's interesting.
And
yep.
One more question.
Hi, I was just wondering about the criteria that you use to evaluate each city and what makes it great to live in, and how do you deal with the subjectivity of that?
Okay. So we don't measure subjective stuff. So I'll just take an example. If we're measuring arts, we don't measure the quality of the art, we measure the number of art galleries. And we assume that there would be, if art galleries exist for a period of time, that there must be a market or demand for the art galleries. So we don't get into, and with Asian countries, we measure tea houses as equivalent to coffee houses. So coffee shops, cafes and tea houses are all the same thing. And people, like in newspapers, ask, why do you measure coffee houses? Well, who here works in a coffee shop? Like most of the part of their time. Who sits in the coffee shop on a laptop? It's pretty much the third space of an office now, isn't it? So yeah, so that's why. But we measure the things we can measure, and if we can't measure it, we try to avoid it. But it's a very good question. Thank you.
Are you going to be... there's a very quick one here. Managed to get the microphone?
Do you work with airlines? Because they spend a lot of time trying to work out which cities to connect with other cities.
We've done some work. We've done a lot of work on airline data, but I can't talk about exactly what we do about that. But yes, we've done a lot of work on airline data. But there's I wouldn't, but someone else may. Who knows? Maybe Elon. Elon seems a very interesting character. He does. She does.
Excellent. So are you going to be around for a little while?
I will be around for most of the day.
Beautiful.
Yes, I might even stay for the drinks, yes.
Excellent. I might even stay for the drinks. Okay, good. So if you have other questions of Christopher, I'm sure he'd be happy to do that. Can you please thank Christopher Hire?